G'day guys, my name is Pete and I have decided to make this channel in order to track my language learning. So I thought I would make this very first video to introduce myself, tell you about my current quote-unquote skills in the current languages that I am learning, and use it as a record, I guess, for where I'll be in the future, looking back, seeing where I'm at. I have always learnt languages at school. I had a story very similar to renowned polyglot Benny Lewis in terms of going through school, being horrible at language learning, never really absorbing much despite years and years of sitting in a classroom, taking notes, doing exams, everything like that. So I did Indonesian in primary school. I did Japanese in primary school for a year. I did Chinese and French in high school, but Chinese I only did for three years or so, and then I dropped it because it was just incredibly difficult and it was hard to compete against the Chinese students we had at the school doing that subject in order to get a good score in the final year. So I was like, there's no chance I'm going to do well. So I ditched that. I kept going with French. However, I did French for years 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So all of high school, 6 years. And then I took it into first year university and just totally failed, effectively. I was doing a science degree at the time. I'd taken on French as 1.5 subjects on top of my science degree, and I just totally fell out of love with it through, effectively, the way it was taught. I was being forced to learn a lot of ancient literature from like the 1800s, 1900s from France, you know, stuff I just wasn't interested in. I couldn't connect with it, and so I ended up getting 50% in the half subject and failing the full subject because I didn't go to the exam. Instead, I was studying for the other exams that I thought I was going to fail in science. So that was a big mistake, but that was my only history in terms of learning languages at university. So half a subject I passed by getting a 50. Pretty shameful. Anyway, so my story, I guess, is that was my background. I could string a few sentences together in French by the end of all of that. I could get along, I could get around if I were in France. I'd been to France only once for a month when I was in year 10 or 11, so when I was 16, I think. And I'd been able to use it. I didn't consider myself fluent at all. Later on, however, I got to fluency in French, and similar to Benny Lewis, I think, again, similar to probably many of you guys, I finally found a way of sort of connecting with the language, becoming really fascinated in that language, meeting a lot of people who I connected with who spoke that language. So my story was that I ended up going to an MMA gym called Absolute MMA in the city, so a mixed martial art gym. I was just interested in doing weight training and doing jiu-jitsu at the gym. So I tried a few of the other classes. Wasn't so much my thing, you know, getting punched in the face. So I did jiu-jitsu. As a result, I ended up meeting a lot of people from France and Brazil, Spain, China. In fact, the majority of the gym tended to be people who were from other countries and spoke English as a second language. So I decided, you know, and I've always had this kind of complex, having learnt languages throughout high school, throughout my life, but never quite getting to the point of fluency. I'd always had this complex, this chip on my shoulder of feeling guilty that I didn't speak a foreign language, particularly when I met so many people who spoke English as a foreign language, not to mention, you know, sometimes several other languages, including their native language. So that always really impressed me. So I took it upon myself to go home and buy a bunch of books, which I have up on the shelf here, even to this day. You know, that you can probably see Harry Potter down here in French, and do Duolingo. In fact, that was sort of how I got started. I got Duolingo. This was the time when Duolingo was starting to sort of get some traction online. It still had those basic, you know, Italian, German, French languages. It hadn't reached its sort of full extent, obviously, to what it has today. So smash that tree out. I did the entire Duolingo tree in probably 2 weeks. I was doing it a few hours a day, refreshing everything. So I was just trying to remember French, because at this time I hadn't done French for probably 10 years. Right? I hadn't touched it. So I would have probably been about 26, 27, maybe even a little bit older. I'm 32 now. And yeah, so it had been a good 10 years since I had really spoken a language, and I was really surprised at how quickly it came back. I started diving in. I was using websites, I was using YouTube, I was using Anki, the flashcard spaced repetition system, and that really boosted me. I was doing, I think some of the days was crazy. I was doing like 244 cards a day, revisions. and learning, 20 to 40 new cards a day. So that was a lot of work. That was a grind, but it really paid off. So I did that. I went to language meetups. I met people online via websites like Speaky and Hello Talk and italki. I was speaking online all the time, right? I got to meet people, I got to get to know people, I got to learn a lot about the culture. So I actually got to the point where I realized I was fluent one day when I was interacting with people who had just arrived in Australia, and I was speaking to them in French somewhat effortlessly, obviously with a lot of mistakes still, but they didn't speak English, or at least very rudimentary English. And so they would keep reverting back to French, and I was like, no problem, we can speak in French. And I just sort of clicked and realized, oh crap, I'm actually quote unquote fluent in this language, at least basic fluency, where obviously I think now if I were to go to France and no one spoke English, I could get around, I could get along, I could express myself. That woke up a kind of thirst in me to want to learn other languages, right? You've got the curiosity there about other people, other cultures, and then just having done the first one, you kind of realize, like a lot of polyglots will tell you online, the process and how you can speed it up the next time when you're learning a new language. So that was my sort of first language to fluency. I would say that I speak Portuguese now better than French, so I would consider that much more fluent than French. But that is because I ended up meeting and marrying a Brazilian. So that story was that in the course of meeting people at the gym and listening to podcasts, I should mention, I was listening to Français Authentique, right? A French podcast. That was amazing. That really helped me get from intermediate to advanced. I was listening to that every single day. Meeting these people at the gym, I was suggesting to them, you should find podcasts like Français Authentique. Use that for your listening comprehension for English, because that'll really get you over the hump. That'll get you ahead. It'll really sharpen your listening comprehension. They told me, there is none, or there are none, rather, in terms of English podcasts like Français Authentique, the way in which you're describing it. There are certainly English podcasts, but there were none the way that he did it, with expressions and speaking to you naturally. So I was like, maybe I can do this. And also, I realized there were no Australian podcasts. So fast forward to today, now my whole job, my entire living is Aussie English, the Aussie English podcast, creating content for people to learn advanced English and also learn about Australian culture, slang, history, everything like that, right? So that's what I do full time, creating content for language learners coming to Australia and wanting to fit in, right? So I met Kel, my wife, in the process of creating episodes and content for Aussie English. She commented one day on a video and just said, "You're doing a great job. I'm from Brazil." And I said to her, I've just started learning Portuguese as the second language after French, and I'd be interested in finding some partners with whom I could speak Portuguese. And I heard her amazing story of coming to Australia and having no English 2 years ago, getting to an incredibly high level. She got like 7.5 on her IELTS after just 2 years of being in Australia, and ultimately ended up falling in love with Kel. 4 months ago, she had our son. We'd been on a journey to Canberra for 6 months when she got a job at the embassy there, and it was that point where we moved in together and we'd moved to Canberra that I really decided we need to just be speaking Portuguese at home. So I'd done the same sort of thing as French. I'd smashed out Portuguese on Duolingo. I'd bought a bunch of really good grammar books that I'd sort of gone through. I had consumed a lot of material online, YouTube, and then I'd also used Anki like crazy as well. But interestingly, this time compared to French, I was using mainly Kel and speaking it at home to develop my fluency. And so this time I did it through speaking as opposed to through the books. And so at least, the majority of the time it was just speaking with no reading or practicing of proper material. I would just ask Kel how to say certain things and then go from there. So I did that for, it's probably been 1.5 years now, and my level is, I would consider, upper intermediate to advanced, where again, I feel like I could get along in a foreign country just fine. So anyway, there's sort of where I'm currently at. Those are my two main languages. Je peux parler un peu de français et eu posso falar português também, okay? So I will probably do videos in the future showing you guys more of what I'm doing, the content that I'm using, the new languages that I'm trying to learn. 我叫 Peter Smissen. 我可以说一点中文. So I'm learning a little bit of Chinese, and I'm also learning Italian as we speak. I've decided to sort of dive in and probably do more Italian now. Yo puedo hablar español. I can speak a little bit of Spanish as well. So anyway, I'm Pete. I love languages. This is sort of an introduction to how I got started. Off the top of my head, I've just done this impromptu video. I hope it's sort of given you an idea of what the channel is going to be like in the future. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them below, let me know. Yeah, so that's probably enough for now, and I'll chat to you soon. Peace.